ready to Bomba!
Welcome to Bomba Live, the show you've been waiting for. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Subscribe to Bomba Live on YouTube so you don't miss one episode of these insightful and entertaining conversations con Bomba. This is your host, Ray Collazo, live at the iconic Pyramid Club on the top of Philadelphia. I'm here with my today's co-host, journalist, organizer, and the Philly Rican, Vanessa Maria Graber. What's going on, Vanessa?
Hola, ¿cómo estamos? Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm doing good, doing good.
We're leveling up. We're in the Pyramid Club
You
this
know
time,
it. You know
it. You know, I'm super excited to be doing our show here.
Vanessa, we've had quite a summer, and we're going to get later into something very personal to us, our Puerto Rican identity in the context of a very, from our perspective, somber anniversary. And we'll have some fun talking about some of the blessings and some highlights of Puerto Rican culture that we love to also discuss. But we want to start the show with some of the opportunities you and I have had to engage Latino leaders from a lot of different sectors around the country. You know, we always got our ear to the street here in Bomba Live, so I think it's instructive for our audience to kind of hear the mood of different leaders in our community in the summer of 2023. So Vanessa, you had the opportunity, and we both had the opportunity to participate this year in the National Association of Hispanic Journalists Conference, NAHJ, and you're actually the local Philly chapter president. So why don't we start with just, talk a little bit about NAHJ and some initial thoughts around your anticipation of going to Miami for this year's conference of a convening of Latino journalists around the country.
Yeah, and being that we are part of the media, I want to shout out SBX Productions for producing our show today. We're really leveling up. I saw the last show. It looks really great. And that's what it's all about with NAHJ as well. Being part of this professional organization is helping Latinos level up and advance their careers in media and journalism. And so being the chapter president, we have a really nice group of folks here in Philadelphia that represent many different aspects of journalism and media. We work with students, we work with early career professionals, we work with our veterans, and all for the purpose of getting more Latinos in news, connecting people to scholarships and employment opportunities, professional development, but more than anything, creating a community, solidarity, mutual aid, so that we can survive this business, which can be really hard to be in it for so many years and survive like so many of our mentors and the people that inspire us. So the goal is to keep Latinos in journalism once they're in the door, retain them there, and to continue developing their skills. So going to the convention, you get to meet all the other folks doing what you're doing across the country. So we got to meet other chapter leaders, lots of workshops and professional development, and a lot of really important and timely conversations.
It was interesting because you have kind of like a very disruptive media landscape right now with a lot of layoffs and a lot of volatility kind of in the corporate media. And we had very strong representation from Latinos that are in the corporate media and the high-end network media. And then, there's people kind of on our level and some level, like independent, kind of more community-oriented. So you actually got to lead a panel related to kind of like the community collaborative aspect of journalism. So share with us kind of your reflections and what kind of feedback did you get from emerging journalists and community-oriented journalists around the country?
So being from community media, right, which is like, I've worked in commercial media, independent, I've worked in all sorts, every aspect of the media business, but my heart and soul is in community media. So shout out to Philly Can where we met and, WPPM and all the other community stations that I've worked with. It's all about partnering with the community, getting out into the community, bringing the media and the journalists to the community. And so we take that philosophy in our NAHJ organization as well by trying to partner with the Latino businesses here in Philly, partnering with community organizations and trying to volunteer, give back, inspire our youth to get involved in journalism and media. But one of the most interesting aspects of our work has been more recently partnering with the Asian American Journalists Association of Philly and the Philly Association of Black Journalists. In no other city across the United States is there a collaboration like ours, and ours is called JAWN, right, which is Philly. It stands for Journalism Accountability Watchdog Network. And we basically advocate and organize together because we're all experiencing the same effects of racism, discrimination, pay inequity in these newsrooms. And so instead of being siloed or being pit against each other, we're working together, advocating together, and trying to figure out how to solve these problems in a coalition.
I kind of view my experience at the conference. It was fantastic. I encourage people next year. It'll be in Los Angeles for the 40th anniversary of the organization. So I encourage anyone that's interested in media and journalism to participate. But I kind of get at it with two hats. From like the activist hat, there's a lot of need for the people in the media, particularly in the Spanish language media, for accurate information about the political process and some of the issues, because there's so much misinformation. And we just need to do a better job as activists, and I hold myself accountable to this, to like distribute this kind of information, not just about some of the obvious, pushing back against false information and that people get on their WhatsApps and on YouTube and on their phones too oftentimes, but just like accurate information about kind of just the day-to-day, how are issues moving, like, the work we're doing around paid leave, or the attacks on nutrition benefits to, working families. It's just a lot of day-to-day stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities there for us to get information out there. There's a lot of interest. And then, particularly the national media is just already in 2024 mode. So how do we elevate voices that are really authentic from the community to tell the real story about how Latinos feel about these issues, how they feel about the candidates, how they feel about kind of our politics and our country going into 2024. There's a lot of opportunities there. So what's your biggest takeaway that you'd want to share? And what's maybe an actionable step that someone that maybe is an emerging journalist, blogger, someone just interested in getting more in tune with the thoughts and the movement of Latino journalists nowadays?
So two big takeaways are factual things, right? So the first thing is that a fact that was discussed at the conference, which was actually revealed last year when the Pew Center for Research released a study that showed that only 8% of journalists are Latino or Latina in the United States, even though we represent more than 20% of the population. So that is a pretty big disparity, right? 8% in newsrooms at 20% of the population. That means either other people are telling our stories, oftentimes incorrectly, inaccurately, or in a negative light, or they're not telling our stories at all. They're not covering our issues. The second thing is that Latinos, and especially Spanish language speaking Latinos, are disproportionately and most affected by disinformation, especially on the social media platforms. So let's talk about those two things. We're most affected by the disinformation, and yet, don't have very much representation in the newsrooms. And so I'm going to say something that kind of goes against what one of your previous guests says about, only journalists can do journalism. And, this is a very elitist point of view as someone from community media and also someone who's a college professor who teaches journalism courses. Anybody can learn journalism, okay? Anybody can learn journalism. You do need training. You do need to know how to fact check and verify. But some of the most brilliant people that I worked with in community media were people from other backgrounds, other professions, that were very well connected to their communities, that played a very significant role, especially during the pandemic, in bringing accurate information to their communities. And so we've shifted from journalism to news and information. And if we're underrepresented in newsrooms and there's this elitism around who can be a journalist, that still doesn't address the fact that our community is lacking information. Who's going to fulfill that role?
It's interesting you bring that up, because one of the takeaways kind of from my content creator hat that I got from the conference was the lack of representation, and just having a platform for kind of like, to your point, like, some would say social media influencers, some would say people that are kind of community journalists or community people that are really documenting what's going on. Like, I think about our friend Dean Huertas in Puerto Rico. Like, he's not a formal journalist, but he's providing good information. He's providing insights, what's really happening in the community, and he's providing people voices to share, what's going on with different issues. So, there's different.
Did you go to journalism school?
No.
Exactly. Right. So this is the point I'm trying to make. Yeah. And like,
also, I don't consider myself a journalist, though. I would say that.
But I think you play a very important role in providing accurate news and information.
Yes.
And amplifying the issues in our community.
And there's other content creators that probably feel the same way I do. Like, I don't feel like I'm a journalist, but are doing similar things.
Right. And
there should be a place in that space for them too.
Provide news and information.
Yeah.
But again, I don't want to be exclusive here. I'm trying to bring people in. And
absolutely.
With NAHJ, our membership and community includes people doing PR in government, people that are community news folks, people who are doing content creation, but that also care about providing factual information, having sources, attributing where they get that information, right? I said 8% of Latinos are in newsrooms. That's from the Pew Research Center. So those are basic skills that can be taught to people. And I think that as journalists, we should lean more into that knowledge and try to share with others and train younger people, especially because the reality is the big media and a lot of traditional broadcast media is not serving the population under 30 years old. And Latinos have the largest and fastest growing population of youth and people under the age of 30. And so that leaves a significant knowledge gap. Who is giving them that information? I feel like we need to do more to train people to play that role.
Well, I think, and there's certainly a lot of interest. I think, it's funny because after 2 meetings, Content Club here at Pyramid Club became Club Contento because there's so much interest from Latinos that we engage in our network that have been part of this initial experience. So there's certainly a lot of interest and a lot of voices.
I agree. And listen, Content Club, if you want someone to come in and teach your folks how to verify and fact check, let's do it.
Vanessa's pitching. A shout out to our friends in the social media space, our Boricua social media all-stars that we got to hang out with a little bit in Miami, Jersey Rican, who I ended up going to the Miami Improv with, see him perform. Funky Bacalao, who actually is just starting. She's also a realtor. So she's starting a Spanish language real estate podcast to teach people about housing and financial literacy with her co-host Melquis. And Yessie Smiles, who's like my resident reggaeton correspondent. She keeps it real 100%. So, but also, and we had a great time in Miami. That goes without saying. So Vanessa, after I left Miami, I went from the boiler to the oven, and I got to go to Chicago. And I know that that was another event that we wanted to catch people up on.
Yes. So you had the opportunity to go to Chicago for the UnidosUS Conference, and more than 2,000 people gathered from over 40 states. You had the opportunity to talk to former Congressman Luis Gutierrez, who is definitely a hero and superstar in our community, a voice for Boricuas. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, well, as the political director for UnidosUS, I got the honor to be on a panel with him to talk about activism and organizing ourselves leading up to the 2024 elections. And so my role in the panel was to kind of give the landscape. And the long and short of it on the political side, from a Latino vote perspective, is that in 2020 and 2022, the Latino vote really was most critical on like a presidential and Senate level. And we saw that in Pennsylvania. We saw that in states like Arizona and Nevada. The 2024, there's a lot more. The map is larger because there's about 24 congressional districts that are in places from Oregon to Pennsylvania to California to Texas. So even if you live in a blue or red state, quote unquote, your vote can still make a big difference in the elections in 2024. So that was my contribution. And then, Louis is, very few elected officials and leaders, period, you can identify as iconic champions on one issue, and he is for two, not just Puerto Rican issues, but also immigration. And so he made, he's like an E.T. movie. He made you laugh, he made you cry. And it was just an incredible moment, and certainly a bucket list moment for me to be able to collaborate with him. And I think that the biggest takeaway from, that particular part of the conference was that there is a lot of inspiration. And even something as simple as my brief presentation, I got a lot of feedback about it. That information, to the point earlier, that simple information was very inspiring to them and gave them hope that they could make a difference. So, and Luis Gutierrez has inspired generations of activists around the country and on the island, and it was just an honor to be there with him and all these other great leaders there.
Speaking of other great leaders, Vice President Kamala Harris was also there. What was her message to this community of UnidosUS leaders, and talking about Latino and the Latino vote in the next election?
Absolutely. I would kind of break it down in three buckets. The first one was she certainly was there to remind the Latino community about the policies that the Biden administration has gotten passed, and to be fair, largely in a bipartisan manner that has created certainly infrastructure investments and other benefits, the climate change investments, capping insulin prices for seniors, things like that. So to remind us about those gains that we've made over the last couple of years, even though in this polarizing political environment sometimes doesn't feel that way. I think the second thing was she really is the for lack of a better term, kind of the voice of the resistance against the ultra-right wing and the impending likely either Trump or certainly someone ultra-right wing presidential candidate that's going to go against Biden in re-election. So while Biden keeps it very presidential, very cool, very down the middle, she really is the one being the spokesperson for that part of their messaging. And the last one is the way it came off to me was kind of reminding us of our connection. She's obviously the first woman of color vice president, a child of immigrants, and, a Californian. And obviously that's a big part of the Latino community. So, just kind of reminding us about that kind of more personal relationship. And it was certainly a message, I think, for the most part, well received. I would say she did remind people, and we cannot repeat this enough, about the shameful state policies that are taking place in places like Florida and Texas. And while she did strongly rebuke the treatment of immigrants along the Texas border, I wish she had been a little stronger about it and been more clear about the lengths that the administration and the DOJ and the various agencies are going to go to hold Governor Abbott accountable, because he's really doing criminal things. You tell people to throw kids in the water to drown, I mean, that's criminal. So I wish that had been stronger, but other than that, for the most part, a well-received message.
Yeah.
Talking about, she's done some extensive research. That's why you got to subscribe, follow, share, like, get the alert for Bomba Live on YouTube, as well as on all podcast platforms. Thank you for joining Bomba Live, the show you've been waiting for.